The bar beyond the stars. The Stellar Forge wasn't just any bar. It was a legendary gathering point located on the edge of the Andromeda trade route. A mix of neon lights and polished metal gave it an industrial yet oddly welcoming charm. Patrons from across the galaxy came here to drink, boast, and occasionally fight. From the hulking, crystalline Kalfar to the sleek, serpentine Zilith, the bar was always filled with species of every shape and size. Tonight, however, the atmosphere carried an extra buzz. At the center of the room, laughter echoed loudly, bouncing off the steel walls. A group of reptilian ocarins sat around a table, their scaly tails twitching as they roared with amusement. They weren't laughing at one of their own. Their attention was focused on a human sitting alone at the corner booth, sipping a drink with a calmness that seemed almost unnatural. The human, clad in worn leather armor and a utility vest, looked out of place among the galaxy's elite warriors and traders. Slung across their shoulder was a long metal object, a crude, angular weapon that seemed older than the bar itself. "What is that, some kind of relic from Earth's scrapyards?" An Ocaran jeered, pointing at the weapon. His voice was rough, like grinding stones. The human didn't respond. They simply took another sip of their drink, their face unreadable. This only fueled the Ocaran's amusement. "I heard humans used to fight with sticks and stones." Another alien chimed in, a Zilith whose forked tongue flicked mockingly. "Maybe that's a fancy stick." The entire bar erupted in laughter. Even the bartender, a grizzled Martian hybrid, smirked as he polished a glass. But not everyone was laughing. From the shadows, a lone Zintar, one of the galaxy's most feared bounty hunters, observed the human with narrowed eyes. His instincts told him something was off. No one walked into the Stellar Forge with that level of confidence unless they had a reason to. The lead Ocaran, a massive brute named Vrock, stood up, towering over the human. His scales shimmered under the neon lights as he flexed his claws. "Hey, human, why don't you show us what that ancient junk can do? Or are you too scared?" The human finally looked up, their eyes calm but piercing. "You really want to see what it can do?" Their voice was steady, almost too steady. Vrock grinned, baring sharp teeth. "Yeah, show us. Prove that humans aren't just primitive weaklings with big mouths." The bar went silent, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. Even the bartender paused mid-polish, his eyes darting between Vrock and the human. The human stood slowly, slinging the weapon off their shoulder and placing it on the table. It was long and angular, with a faint hum emanating from its core. Despite its worn appearance, there was an undeniable energy to it, like a predator waiting to strike. "All right," the human said, their voice low but carrying across the room. "Pick a target." Vrock laughed, motioning toward an old dented service droid standing near the bar's entrance. "That piece of junk will do. Let's see your relic in action." The human nodded, lifting the weapon effortlessly. With a flick of their wrist, a small panel on the side lit up, glowing with an eerie blue light. They aimed at the droid, their movements precise and fluid. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a deafening crack, a beam of energy shot out of the weapon, striking the droid square in the chest. The entire bar gasped as the droid didn't just fall. It disintegrated into a pile of smoldering ash. The force of the shot left a scorch mark on the far wall, the metal sizzling as smoke filled the air. The human lowered the weapon, their expression unchanged. "Still think it's just a relic." The bar was dead silent. Even Vrock, who had been moments away from making another joke, looked stunned. His claws twitched nervously as he took a step back. Where did you get that?" one of the patrons finally managed to ask, their voice trembling. The human shrugged, slinging the weapon back over their shoulder. "Earth. You know, the planet you all love to underestimate." With that, they sat back down, picking up their drink as if nothing had happened. The crowd stayed frozen, unsure of what to do next. The laughter was gone, replaced by an uneasy tension that spread through the room like wildfire. In the shadows, the Zinter bounty hunter smirked to himself. "This just got interesting," he muttered, sipping his own drink. The human's calm demeanor, paired with the weapon's devastating power, had shifted the atmosphere entirely. What had started as a night of mockery had turned into a chilling reminder of humanity's hidden strength. And this was only the beginning. Whispers of the Relic. The aftermath of the human's display lingered like an electric charge in the air. The stellar forge was no longer filled with laughter and mockery. Instead, quiet murmurs buzzed among the patrons, their voices hushed as if the human's weapon could still hear them. At the center of the room, Vrak sat frozen, his claws digging into the table as his pride wrestled with the fear crawling up his spine. No one had ever seen a weapon like that, not even the Kalfar warlords, who prided themselves on their planet-destroying arsenal. Across the bar, the Zinter bounty hunter, Krell, leaned back in his seat. His reptilian eyes gleamed with interest as he studied the human. He wasn't the only one. Others, like the mercenaries gathered in the far corner and the smuggler crew near the bar, exchanged knowing glances. The humans sat in their corner, sipping their drink as if nothing had happened, their expression unreadable. The weapon rested casually against the table, its surface dull but emanating an aura that no one could ignore. It was the bartender who finally broke the silence. He cleared his throat and approached cautiously, his metallic hand gripping a glass as if it could shield him from the weapon. "So, that's quite a thing you've got there," he said, his tone carefully neutral. The human glanced up, a faint smirk playing on their lips. "Yeah, comes in handy." The bartender hesitated, then leaned in slightly. "You know, weapons like that, they're not exactly common. Someone might pay a lot of credits to find out where you got it." The human's smirk vanished. They leaned back, their gaze sharp, and someone might lose a lot more than credits trying. The bartender straightened immediately, muttering an apology before scurrying back to his station. But the exchange had already caught Krell's attention. The Zinter's mind raced, piecing together what little he knew about humans. Primitive, yes, but resourceful. They were known for digging into their planet's long-buried past, unearthing relics and weapons that other species had long forgotten. If this human had truly uncovered something ancient and powerful, it could shift the balance of power across the galaxy. Krell wasn't the only one thinking this. A group of armored Vulcan mercenaries whispered among themselves, their glowing yellow eyes darting toward the human. It was clear they were debating whether to make a move. The human noticed. They glanced toward the mercenaries, their expression calm but their hand drifting ever so slightly toward the weapon. The message was clear. "Try it, and you won't leave here alive." The mercenaries hesitated, their leader shaking his head. But the tension didn't ease. Then, the doors to the bar hissed open, and a new presence entered. A tall figure cloaked in shimmering armor stepped into the room. The lights from the bar reflected off their suit, giving them an almost otherworldly glow. The emblem of the Galactic Consortium, a coalition feared even by warlords, was etched onto their chest plate. The figure scanned the room, their helmet tilting slightly as their gaze locked onto the human. They approached with slow, deliberate steps, the crowd parting nervously to let them pass. "You," the figure said, their voice modulated and cold. "You possess something of great interest to the consortium." The human looked up, unimpressed. "Do I?" The armored figure's posture stiffened. "We know what that weapon is. Hand it over, and you'll be compensated fairly." The human chuckled softly, their fingers brushing against the weapon's grip. "Fairly. Funny word coming from the consortium. Tell me, what's your idea of fair?" The room seemed to hold its breath. The consortium was not known for negotiation. They were known for taking what they wanted, no matter the cost. The armored figure's tone hardened. "This is not a request." The human stood slowly, their calm demeanor now edged with a quiet intensity. "And this is not for sale." For a moment, the room was silent. Then, faster than anyone could react, the human had the weapon aimed at the armored figure. The hum of energy grew louder, filling the room with a low, ominous vibration. The armored figure didn't flinch, but their hand hovered near their own weapon. "You dare threaten the consortium?" The human's voice was steady, their eyes locked onto the figure. "It's not a threat. It's a promise. Walk away." The tension was suffocating, the crowd frozen as they waited to see who would make the first move. Krell leaned forward in his seat, a rare grin spreading across his reptilian face. "Things are about to get interesting," he muttered to himself. Finally, the armored figure stepped back, their voice laced with warning. "This isn't over." They turned and left the bar, the doors hissing shut behind them. The humans sat back down, their weapons still humming faintly as they resumed their drink. Around the room, the patrons exchanged glances, their respect for the human rising alongside their fear. The Stellar Forge had seen its share of fights and legends, but tonight, everyone knew they'd just witnessed the start of something far bigger. The consortium strikes back. The Stellar Forge buzzed with energy after the humans' bold stand against the consortium. Patrons exchanged hurried whispers, their eyes darting between the door and the calm figure seated in the corner. Many had seen brawls, even battles, in the infamous bar, but few had witnessed someone openly defy the consortium and walk away unscathed. Krell, the Zinter bounty hunter, remained at his table, his reptilian grin unwavering. His sharp eyes studied the human, noting their unwavering calm despite the storm they had stirred. It was clear to him that this wasn't a fluke. The human had done their homework. But the consortium never took defiance lightly, and they never acted alone. The calm lasted all of 20 minutes. Then, the airlock doors hissed open again, and 3 more armored figures entered the bar. These weren't ordinary consortium enforcers. They were elite operatives, clad in sleek, black suits that absorbed the dim light of the room. Their helmets glowed faintly with crimson visors, giving them an aura of menace. The crowd fell silent, instinctively shrinking back. Even the boldest of mercenaries avoided eye contact with the operatives. They were a whisper of death, the consortium's silent executioners. The lead operative scanned the room, their voice amplified and sharp. "The human will surrender the weapon immediately. Any who interfere will share their fate." The human, still seated, didn't even look up. Guess the consortium didn't take the hint. They muttered under their breath, loud enough for only Krell to hear. The Center chuckled softly. "You've made some powerful enemies, human. Hope that relic of yours is more than just a party trick." The human finally rose from their seat, their weapons still resting casually in one hand. They locked eyes, or at least visors, with the lead operative. "I'm starting to think the consortium is just hard of hearing," the human said, their tone light, but laced with steel. The lead operative's visor pulsed red. "Last warning." The human sighed, hefting the weapon onto their shoulder. The crowd collectively leaned forward, holding their breath. "All right," the human said, their voice carrying a note of finality. "Let's dance." The lead operative raised their hand, signaling the others to advance. But before they could take a step, the weapon in the human's hands came to life. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the weapon, striking the floor between the operatives with enough force to send shockwaves through the room. Tables overturned, glasses shattered, and the air filled with the acrid scent of scorched metal. The operatives staggered but recovered quickly, their own weapons drawn and aimed. But the human was already moving, their reflexes impossibly fast. With a flick of their wrist, the weapon shifted, its energy signature changing. The next shot wasn't a pulse. It was a focused beam, slicing through the operative's cover and forcing them to scatter. Krell leaned back, thoroughly enjoying the show. "That's no ordinary relic," he muttered. "That's a piece of art." The operatives regrouped, their movements precise and coordinated. They launched a barrage of plasma bolts, each shot aimed with deadly accuracy. But the human seemed to anticipate their every move, dodging with an almost casual grace. Then the weapon hummed again, its energy building to a crescendo. The human aimed it skyward and fired. The shot didn't hit anyone. It struck the ceiling, triggering an explosion of light and sound that disoriented everyone in the room. When the smoke cleared, the human was gone. The operatives stood frozen, their visors scanning the room for any trace of their target. The crowd remained silent, unwilling to draw attention to themselves. Finally, the lead operative growled in frustration. "Seal the exits. They won't get far." But Krell, still seated at his table, chuckled softly. He sipped his drink, his sharp teeth flashing in amusement. "They're not running," he said to no one in particular. "They're setting the stage." The operatives glared at him, but didn't respond. They stormed out of the bar, their heavy boots echoing in the tense silence. When they were gone, the crowd erupted into murmurs once more. The bartender, trembling, approached Krell. Do you think the human will survive this?" Krell shrugged, his grin never fading. "Survive? Probably. But if I were those operatives, I'd be worried about what happens next." Somewhere in the shadows outside the bar, the human crouched, their weapon humming faintly as they recalibrated its settings. Their expression was calm, but their eyes burned with determination. The consortium had underestimated them, and that was a mistake they wouldn't live long enough to regret. The consortium's trap. The stellar forge was quiet after the human's explosive exit. Patrons whispered in hushed tones, speculating on the consortium's next move. Krell, the Zinter bounty hunter, leaned back in his chair, his sharp claws idly tracing patterns on the table. "They've set the trap," he muttered to himself, his reptilian grin widening. But do they even know what they're dealing with? Outside the bar, the human moved with practiced stealth through the labyrinth of the station's lower levels. The dimly lit corridors echoed with distant clanks and hisses of machinery. Their weapon, now quiet but still pulsing with energy, rested on their shoulder. The consortium's operatives weren't far behind. Their crimson visors scanned every shadow, and their synchronized movements betrayed the precision of years of training. But their prey was no ordinary fugitive. The human stopped at a junction, listening intently. They placed a small device on the wall, a sensor scrambler. The faint hum of its activation reassured them as they moved deeper into the maze. The consortium's leader, an imposing figure known only as Operative Zorak, stood in the command hub of the station. His helmet reflected the dim light of holographic screens displaying live feeds from his operatives. "Do we have them yet?" Zorak demanded, his voice a low growl. "Negative, Commander," one of his subordinates replied. "The human has evaded all tracking signals. They're using advanced countermeasures." Zorak slammed his fist onto the console, causing a flicker in the holograms. "This isn't just a scavenger with a stolen relic. This is someone who knows our tactics. Increase the sweep. Seal the lower levels." The humans smirked as they overheard Zorak's order through a hacked consortium channel. They tapped the side of their visor, the interface displaying a map of the station. "So predictable," they murmured. The lower levels of the station were rarely used, a tangle of forgotten cargo bays, maintenance tunnels, and storage chambers. It was the perfect place for an ambush. The human reached a wide-open bay filled with rusting crates and deactivated loader bots. They crouched behind a crate, pulling out another device, a small emitter. Placing it carefully, they activated it, and the room filled with faint, pulsating energy waves. As the first operative entered the bay, their visor flickered. "Commander, there's interference here," the operative reported, their voice crackling. "Proceed with caution," Zorak ordered. "The human is here. I can feel it." The human watched from the shadows as the operatives spread out, their movements methodical. The lead operative stepped into the center of the bay, scanning the area with a handheld device. The weapon hummed softly in the human's hands, its power building as they adjusted its settings. They whispered to themselves, "Time to show them what a primitive weapon can do." The first shot was a low-energy pulse, striking the lead operative's scanner and frying its circuits. The room plunged into chaos as the remaining operatives scrambled for cover, their visors struggling to recalibrate. "Contact," one of them shouted, firing blindly into the shadows. Krell leaned forward, his grin widening. "You're wasting your time," he said loudly. "Do you really think they'd be hiding here after what they pulled? Humans are smarter than that." The enforcer glared at him, but said nothing. Krell's reputation was well known, and no one dared to provoke him. The tension hung in the air as the enforcers fanned out, scanning the room. Krell chuckled to himself, sipping his drink. Elsewhere, the human moved through the station's maintenance tunnels, their weapon ready. The consortium's increased presence was expected, but it didn't deter them. Their destination was a heavily guarded storage facility, a place where the consortium stored classified technology. They needed what was inside. Slipping past the patrols with calculated precision, they reached the facility's outer gate. A security panel blinked, awaiting input. The human pulled out a small device, attaching it to the panel. Within moments, the gate hissed open. Inside, rows of crates glowed under dim lighting. The human moved quickly, scanning each crate until they found what they were looking for. A sealed container marked with the consortium's highest security clearance. "Gotcha," they whispered, prying the container open. Inside was a compact module, its surface shimmering with an otherworldly glow. Footsteps echoed behind them. The human turned to see a group of consortium enforcers, weapons drawn. "End of the line," the lead enforcer growled. The human smirked, raising their weapon. "You really think so?" Before the enforcers could react, the human activated a smoke device, filling the room with a dense, blinding fog. Shots rang out, but the human moved like a ghost, their weapon disabling the enforcers one by one. As the fog cleared, the human was gone, leaving behind only the unconscious bodies of their pursuers. Back in the bar, Krell received a silent message on his communicator. He read it, his grin widening. "They've done it again," he muttered, raising his glass in a silent toast. Let the galaxy tremble. The consortium was learning a harsh lesson. Humans didn't just survive. They thrived, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And this human wasn't just fighting back. They were rewriting the rules of the game. The consortium's trap. The consortium's command center was alive with activity. Zorak loomed over the holographic map of the stellar forge, his cybernetic hand clenching and unclenching as he examined the latest reports. His enforcers had failed to capture the human in the storage facility, and the stolen module was a devastating blow. "They're mocking us," he snarled. "This ends now." A junior officer cautiously approached. "Sir, we've tracked their movements to the lower levels. They've been accessing maintenance tunnels and avoiding direct confrontation." "Perfect," Zorak said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Set the trap, seal off all exits, and flood the sector with gas. I want them alive." The officer hesitated. "Alive? After what they've done?" Zorak's glare silenced the protest. "Alive. I want them to see what happens when you defy the consortium." In the dimly lit maintenance tunnels, the human crouched near a vent, studying a map projected from their wrist device. The stolen module was secured in their pack, its weight a constant reminder of the stakes. Their wrist device beeped softly, alerting them to a shift in the station's energy readings. The tunnels ahead were being sealed off, and gas was beginning to seep through the vents. "They're learning," the human muttered, finally taking me seriously. A sound echoed down the corridor, metal boots clanging against the floor. Consortium enforcers were closing in, their voices carrying through the narrow space. "Spread out. No one escapes this time." The human's mind raced. They couldn't afford to be cornered, not with the stolen module. They tapped into their wrist device, triggering a diversion. Further down the tunnel, an old service droid powered up, its loud clattering drawing the enforcer's attention. As the footsteps moved toward the noise, the human slipped into a side passage, moving swiftly and silently. In the Stellar Forge's bustling central hub, Krell observed the commotion from his usual corner. Consortium enforcers were everywhere, interrogating anyone who looked suspicious. Krell chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "Looks like they finally got their feathers ruffled," he muttered to himself. A nervous patron leaned in. "Do you think they'll catch the human?" Krell smirked. "Catch them? Not likely. Humans are annoyingly resourceful. I'd bet my ship that they'll slip through the consortium's fingers again." The humans' escape was growing more perilous by the second. The gas was thickening, and their oxygen mask was running low. Their route to the extraction point was blocked, forcing them to double back. Ahead, a group of enforcers appeared, their weapons ready. The human pressed against the wall, calculating their options. A small device in their hand began to blink, a last resort tool they had hoped not to use. With a flick of their wrist, they activated it, creating a localized electromagnetic pulse. The tunnel lights flickered and went dark. The enforcers' weapons and communication devices failed, leaving them stumbling in confusion. Using the cover of darkness, the humans slipped past them, emerging into a larger maintenance chamber. Zorak monitored the operation from the command center, his patience wearing thin. "Report," he barked. "Sir," an officer said nervously, "we've lost contact with the squad in Sector 12. The human is still evading us." Zorak's cybernetic hand slammed against the console. "Enough of this. Lock down the entire sector and deploy the shock troopers. If we can't take them alive, then destroy them." The officer hesitated. "But sir, the collateral damage." "Do it," Zorak roared. The human reached a ventilation shaft leading to the station's outer hull. The module in their pack glowed faintly, its energy signature pulsing in rhythm with their racing heartbeat. The sound of approaching boots reminded them they were running out of time. They climbed into the shaft, their body protesting the strain, and began the slow ascent. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the station's intercom. "Attention, fugitive. This is Zorak. Surrender now, and you may yet live. Continue to resist, and you will face annihilation." The human paused, their grip tightening on the shaft's rungs. A smirk crossed their face. "Nice speech," they muttered. "Too bad I don't take orders from tyrants." With renewed determination, they pushed onward, their mind focused on reaching the extraction point. Outside the station, a small cloaked ship waited in the shadow of a nearby asteroid. Its pilot, a grizzled human veteran, tapped impatiently on the console. "Come on," the pilot muttered. "You're cutting it close." Suddenly, the ship's sensors picked up a faint signal. "Gotcha," the pilot said, activating the docking mechanism. The human emerged from the ventilation shaft onto a maintenance platform overlooking the void of space. The cloaked ship appeared, its airlock extending toward them. Behind them, the sound of enforcers closing in grew louder. The human sprinted toward the ship, leaping into the airlock just as the first shots rang out. The airlock sealed, and the ship's engines roared to life. Inside, the pilot glanced back at the human. "You never make it easy, do you?" The human grinned, holding up the stolen module. "Where's the fun in that?" As the ship disappeared into the void, the consortium was left with nothing but frustration and the growing realization that humanity was a force they could no longer ignore. Humanity's relic revealed. The consortium's war council convened in a vast chamber aboard the flagship Dominion Apex. Holograms of high-ranking officials flickered to life around the circular table, their faces a mixture of fury and disbelief. Zorak stood at the center, his cybernetic hand resting on the console. The failed operation haunted his every thought. The human had escaped with the module, and now rumors of their mysterious relic were spreading like wildfire across the galactic networks. "This is unacceptable," barked a council member. "How could one primitive manage to outwit our entire force?" "Primitive," Zorak growled, his mechanical eye glowing brighter. "There is nothing primitive about humanity. Their relic tank, their tactics, they're far more advanced than we assumed. Underestimating them has cost us dearly." Another council member leaned forward. Then what is this relic they've stolen? What do they plan to do with it? Before Zorak could answer, the chamber's main display lit up, showing live footage from a remote mining colony. The feed was shaky, captured by a fleeing worker. A massive construct dominated the landscape, a colossal tank unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Its black armor glinted under the twin suns, and its cannon hummed with ominous energy. The tank fired once, obliterating a consortium outpost in a single devastating blast. The council members gasped in horror. "They've activated it," Zorak whispered. On a desolate world far from the consortium's reach, the humans stood atop the Iron Leviathan, the legendary tank they had painstakingly restored. The stolen module pulsed faintly within the tank's core, its power breathing life into the ancient machine. A small group of humans gathered around, their faces a mix of awe and determination. This was no longer just a weapon. It was a symbol of defiance, a relic of humanity's indomitable spirit. "We've sent our message," the humans said, their voice echoing through the comms. "The galaxy knows what we're capable of. Now it's time to ensure they never forget." Back aboard the Dominion Apex, chaos erupted. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Consortium forces retreating from human-controlled territories, rebellions igniting on oppressed worlds, and human fleets appearing in unexpected sectors. Zorak clenched his fists. This isn't just about a tank anymore. Humanity is uniting, and they're rallying others to their cause. We must act swiftly or risk losing everything. A council member nodded. Then we strike with overwhelming force. Wipe them out before their movement spreads further. But Zorak shook his head. No, this is no longer a war of weapons. It's a war of symbols. Destroying their tank won't stop them. It'll only strengthen their resolve. On the battlefield, the Iron Leviathan led a coalition of rebel forces against the consortium's fleet. Its cannon roared, each shot tearing through the enemy's ranks. The humans fought with unyielding determination, their tactics unpredictable and relentless. In the skies above, consortium ships fell back, their superior numbers meaningless against the coordinated human offensive. The human pilot of the Iron Leviathan smirked, gripping the controls tightly. "Let them laugh at us. Let them think we're weak. We'll show them what humanity is truly made of." The consortium's downfall was swift and unexpected. The Iron Leviathan became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even the smallest spark could ignite a revolution. And in the end, humanity didn't just survive. They thrived, carving out a new place in the galaxy where their strength and ingenuity were respected, and their defiance was never forgotten. Check.